everyone, and good morning.
Morning.
My name is Monica Spears, and I'm Director of Development for Girls Inc. of Westchester County. And this year I have the pleasure of also serving as the President of the Board for the Association of Development Officers, known also as ADO. So welcome to Meet the Funders. The association, up to that term. The Association of Development Officers is also proud to work on this event and collaborate with the GPLH. I'm a member of GPLH also, but the grant professionals of the Lower Hudson. So we're grateful for that partnership, and we look forward to working with them not only on this every year, but on other collaborative events as well. So we're looking forward to that. We want to express our deep gratitude to our long-standing sponsor, Con Edison. Con Edison has been so generous to ADO over the years, and it's because of their support that we're able to provide this event to the community at no cost. So thank you, Con Edison. Con Edison has been an exceptional pillar of support for the nonprofit community, and we're so grateful for their continued support of all of the ADO programming. So I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Jane Solnick, Director of Corporate Affairs for Con Edison.
Good morning, everybody. It is so nice to see so many friendly faces. And this is always such a smiley group. Have you ever noticed that? It's really great. So I was chatting with a couple of people outside, and it's really wonderful that we can gather again. Hello to you out there that I know couldn't join us today and are joining from afar. But Con Edison, as Monica had pointed out, has partnered with ADO for several years. And we particularly appreciate the partnership because we can't fund everybody, as you all know. And this gives a venue for us to help the entire community of development officers, because without you, our community would not be as strong as it is. And especially coming off of COVID, I know we're not totally gone from it, but a lot of your organizations really stepped up and helped us get through it. You didn't go hide in the woodwork. I know that you were behind little screens. I do know that, but you didn't go hide in the woodwork, and you did. And I got to tell you, you're out here in full force, and it's great to see. So on behalf of Con Edison, all our employees who both work and live in the community, we thank you for all you do. We really appreciate it. And this particular event, we're pleased to sponsor because, you know, this group of people, I just want to point out, because being on the same side as some of them, being the funder to you, life changes sometimes. And so I think for many of you who've been around a couple of years like I have, we've seen changes. An example is Con Edison at one point financed healthcare events, you know, funding programs. The reality is that doesn't formulate with our organization and what we're trying to do in the community. So those who have been around for years saw us move away from that. And I think that what you need to do, which is particularly important today, is you have to look at your funders and keep in contact with them, because the focus of the funders organization may change over time. And so you need to keep in touch with them. We also know that we're in a different role now, and we have to account for everything. So we know that many of us, because I've spoken to others and I've sat on this panel before, many of us require that you give us reports now. Like this whole world of development officers has changed over the years. I've seen it change dramatically. So I think it's a great thing. So I want to encourage you to take advantage of these lovely people up here and pick their brains today, because that's what we're all here for. So enjoy the day, and it's great to see you all. Thank you.
So thank you, Jane and Con Ed, for all that you do for all of us. I'd also like to say that we're joined today by some of the ADO board members. And I'd like to take a moment to ask them to please stand and be recognized. And I'd also like to say thank you to our hosts, Wrexham, and ADO's audio visual sponsor, Corporate AV. So thank you so much to them. Without them, we could not host this wonderful event. And last but not least, it's my pleasure to introduce Hillary Millman, who is ADO's Executive Director. Hillary?
Good morning.
Again.
So for those of you who may not know us, there are some new friends in the audience today. ADO, as we're known, the Association of Development Officers, is a nonprofit membership organization for development professionals, those who work with them and support them, and anyone with fundraising responsibilities, executive directors, board members, volunteers. We host monthly educational events where you can learn from experts and each other, connect with peers, and even develop great friendships, which is the reason I hang around. We pride ourselves, as I said to a couple people this morning, we pride ourselves on being welcoming. I hope you've felt that today, and we would love to welcome you. So you please visit our website, adoonline.org. You can speak to me or one of the board members who, for some reason, very reluctantly stood up a few minutes ago. I also wanted to mention, when you came in today, you may have seen these flyers out on our table asking you to save the date for our Philanthropy Awards Breakfast, which is on March 13th. And at that event, we highlight the importance of fundraising and philanthropy, and we celebrate specific people and organizations who make a tremendous impact through those endeavors. So with so many members of the nonprofit and philanthropic community here today, I also want you to start thinking about people who would make good nominees for one of those awards. We have categories for a full board, individual board members, fundraiser of the year, youth in philanthropy, which is my favorite, philanthropist of the year, community and corporate foundations, and others. So we're going to be sending out an email about that soon. And it's a really nice way to honor the people who are making an impact in the community. So I do hope that you'll all consider nominating someone. So I also want to echo our thanks to Con Edison and Rexon, Maureen Falvey, who may be hiding here somewhere. And thank you so much. And to the team at Corporate AV, I wanted to say thanks again. So without further ado, I will introduce Allison Paul, co-president of GPLH, who's going to moderate our panel.
Yeah, one more good morning. I'm Allison Paul, president of GPLH, but I have a co-president, if you would wave, Deborah Brown, over here. And we have some board members in the room and past presidents, if you would just wave as well. All right, great. And who knows, maybe there's a prospective president in the room. So GPLH, we exist to help anybody, any organization increase their grant writing capacity so that you can bring in more money to help fulfill the missions that you care about. We do webinars, and we have a lot of resources on our website, and we're very available. We really want to help you bring in the bucks. And Meet the Funders is one of our favorite events. It's particularly meaningful for me because I'm a past president of ADO, so it's a nice coming together. So we have 4 panelists this morning, and you're thinking, but there were 5. Yeah, things happen. So we have 4. Yesterday we had 3, so we're thrilled we have 4. So before we just jump into this, I do want to mention that we are doing another joint event with ADO in January, grant writing and DEI. I don't know if Jeff Winthrall is in the room, and he's leading this with Maria Dautruche, who some of you may know. So that should be an exciting event. And I think now it's time to get going with some introductions. So down at your right, all the way at the end, we have Kara McLaughlin D'Angelo, who is the executive director of the Patrina Foundation. This is based in Pelham. It's a 3-generation family foundation. And Kara has a financial background. So if you have questions about finances, and I'm going to be asking about how closely do you look at our dollars, she might be one you might want to listen carefully to. She also has a podcast called She the Change, which I think sounds fascinating, and she's on the Pelham Town Council. She has an MBA from Columbia. We have a very educated panel this morning. Welcome, Kara.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have Kimberley Chin. She gets an extra clap because she's the last minute stuff. So she's already high marks, good sport in my book because Liza Primeau has COVID. So thank you so much for stepping in at the last minute. Kimberley is a senior program officer of basic needs and healthcare and workforce programs at Mother Cabrini Health Foundation. And she's been there since 2021. Before that, she was deputy director and acting executive director at the Children's Defense Fund. So passionate about children and social justice. She also was an Atlantic Philanthropy Senior Visiting Fellow at Fordham Law School's Farrick Center for Social Justice, where she worked on economic justice and equity issues. So I think you can see something about her from that background. And she has an MPA from NYU and a law degree from Fordham, double degrees. Welcome, Kimberley. We have someone else with double degrees, double masters. I'd like to introduce you to Tara Seeley. She is the Senior Program Officer at Westchester Community Foundation, where she's been since 2016. She's responsible for the foundation's grant-making programs in different buckets, and Robin is here. That our program officers at our local foundation have different buckets. So if you are interested in applying for workforce development and job placement, community development, access, social justice, conservation, and environment, this is the person you want to meet. And Robin, will you just raise a hand too? We have another program officer, and Laura Perkins, 3 program officers. More people to network with. So Tara has a joint degree in divinity and law from Vanderbilt. So double wow. And Susan Abbott is the director of grants programs at ArtsWestchester. And yes, she also has a master's. What do you think it is? She works in an arts organization. She has an MFA in performing arts management. She oversees $2+ million in grant making for Westchester and Loughlin counties through the ArtsWestchester. Previous experience, she was at the Miller Theater and has worked in a lot of other arts organizations and is very committed to artists and supporting arts organizations in our area. So that's our panel. And I think we have a lot to learn. All right, I'm going to ask each person to briefly now tell about the grant-making priorities of the organization that they represent. So Kara, we'll start with you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. The Patrina Foundation, as Allison mentioned, is a 3-generation family foundation, and we support girls and women's social and educational programming in Westchester, Long Island, New York City, and selective areas in New Jersey.
Great, thank you. Kimberley.
So the Mother Cabrini Health Foundation is a fairly new foundation. It's a conversion from Fidelis in 2018. So we're 5 years old. And our focus, when we started, we were just getting the money out, basically. And it's the largest health foundation in New York State currently because of the conversion. We just this past year have focused on 4 basic areas. So it's access to healthcare, basic needs, healthcare workforce, and mental and behavioral health. We also have a general fund, which captures sort of everything else. We've always been very broad in our funding. The populations, if you are familiar with it, it's sort of everything. It's immigrants, it's young people, it's older adults, sort of very vulnerable populations. And we are layering that now with our program areas, but it still remains fairly broad in how we do fund, as long as it's related to health and social determinants of health.
Thank you. Tara.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me. It's great to see you all. Westchester Community Foundation is a community foundation like many across the country. There's a whole network of community foundations. We exist because donors have given funds to us to benefit the community. And as a community foundation, everything rests on donor intent. So when we say we fund youth programs, it's because a donor created a fund to benefit youth. We fund in the environment because donors have established long-term permanent funds to make grants in the environment. So if you look at our website, you see that we do a lot of different things. I'm going to give you the broad categories, but I'm also going to tell you something about how we shift. In other words, this year, it's very exciting. We have new funds and a new program officer developing programs around those funds because a donor unknown to us created a fund to benefit Native American children. Well, we had no experience in doing that and are developing a program in that. So keep your eyes on us. We never know when we'll have a new fund, but basic categories are, do have small health funding, workforce development, youth development, a very targeted arts program, access to legal services, social justice, and I may have forgotten something, but keep your eyes on our website and look at our broad categories and then look at the specific language around those categories.
Thank you. And Susan.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. I think I'm going to have to go back to school and get another degree so I can keep pace with my colleagues up here on the dais. So I am the Director of Grants Programs from ArtsWestchester. I've been there just over 8 years. We are the dedicated Arts Council for Westchester County, also serving Loughlin. As Allison mentioned, our grant pool at the moment is just over $2 million, which is funding that we have to advocate for ourselves. And that is a mix of state and county support that funds our programs that are largely project-based funding for organizations and artists in the 2 counties. There's actually, I was happy to see this morning, there's a couple of grantees of ours in the audience today. It's nice to see some familiar faces. So our funding ranges anything from, could be $1,000 for an artist to do a mural or do a residency, all the way up to organizational support, which could be in some tens of thousands. But we do a competitive process. It goes through a panel review. I see some folks in the audience that might be good panelists in the future. So I look forward to making connections. But what drives a lot of our funding is the idea of access and access to the arts or certain art forms that perhaps your community or your population might not have access to otherwise, and also supporting the capacity of organizations and artists as they continue to develop.
Thank you. All right. The way it's going to work is I have some questions and I'm going to leave time for you to ask questions as well. So let's get going. Quick question, just a show of hands. Who uses a scoring rubric in reviewing grants? Okay, 2. All right. Who has a committee that meets and makes final decisions? All right, 3. And who has a program officer that makes recommendations to committees that make decisions? Okay, all right. Is that helpful? All right, but let's
The answer is yes.
okay, let's lift the veil a little more and just tell us a little bit about what happens after the application goes in. And who wants to start that one off?
I can start.
Great.
So I work for a family foundation. Think Thanksgiving dinner, 3 generations from across the country. So it can get exciting. It can get interesting. We have some political divergences, particularly in the last several years, where it didn't seem to matter back in the day. Now it does. So I'm the moderator, I'm the arbiter, I'm the referee. And so that can be interesting. I try to keep it all out of what we're reading, because the one thing they all have in common is they want to give back to the communities. They grew up on Long Island. I live in Westchester, so I made sure Westchester was taken care of. They all have lived in New York City. So the idea was to give back within our region. One of the trustees decided, why don't we support girls' single-sex education? Because my mom, my sister, my cousins, my niece all went to all women's schools, and they are hugely successful. And so that quickly grew into after-school programs and summer programs and sports, arts, and then social justice, STEM, alternatives to incarceration. So we touch a little bit around everything that is. So the process is we have 4 cycles a year. We take unsolicited grants. We're probably one of the few organizations that do that. And that's because I'm the staff and I can't find you. So I built this beautiful website so you can find me. And what I ask is that if everybody would just reach out to me, an email, a phone call, ahead of time. I don't do an LOI. If I say, yes, you're in what we're doing now, then please submit an application. We have all that information on the website. And then I go through, make sure it still meets our criteria. Then I present it, I go visit. I see every organization that I present to our board, and then we discuss.
All right, I think we'll
Yeah.
stop there. Yeah. 'Cause
Okay.
some of those things we're going to talk about more
Okay.
too, but thank you. That was helpful. Yes. All right, Mother Cabrini, many of us have applied to you. What happens? It's a huge foundation. What happens?
It is a huge foundation, There's more than one staff, looking at all of them. And we do have an LOI process. We get over 2,000 and we have one single at this point entry point at this moment. The time period, it's in generally May, so look out for us in May. We are evolving. So those of you who maybe known about us, I think we at one point had only December board meetings where we sort of gave out grants. Now we have 2 board meetings where we give out grants, but it's still the May application point. We have an LOI process. We get over 2,000 applications. There are not that many of us. We were actually down a few program offices this year. So it's a process. We are looking through those very quickly to turn it around. I think within a month, we let you guys know whether you're coming to a full application. Then we have the full application. You're invited to come back, and it's just more of the LOI. It's the same application, but just more. And you submit that. Once again, the same not necessarily the same program officers. So as we go on further, just to let you know, some other people maybe will read them, read the applications, and we go through a process. We have the scoring rubric. And then it sort of moves on to then we make recommendations. It goes on to our senior leadership and then to the board committees. They sort of have gotten this docket and then decisions are made. So when you ask what we did sort of everything. So it's a long process. For those of you who have applied, you do realize that. But, you know, I don't know how we will evolve. At the moment, it's a September and a December dockets that we have. Who knows what'll happen. So at one point it was just December. So that's very quickly what we do. We'll go into, I guess, more of the sort of how we look at it, but that's our process.
Great. Thank you. Sarah.
At the Westchester Community Foundation, we also work with an LOI first, and that is, those come to program officers and we determine, does the program or project that is described fit within our funding categories? And within the funding category, does it fit our priorities in the funding category? And does it seem to make sense, the program that's been described? And then we will, if the answer is yes, then we invite to the organization to submit a full proposal. And the 3 program officers then work with the proposals that come in. Our job is to boil down all of the important information in your proposal to be able to tell our board of advisors what problem you're trying to solve, how you intend to solve it, who will benefit, how you'll know they're benefiting, and what your project budget is. I mean, we really take your 12 pages and we have to collapse it to 5. And then there's a rigorous review process because we are part of the New York Community Trust. So my written work of your written work gets reviewed up several levels and then finally goes to our board of advisors. It is as you heard of other foundations, you know, it can seem like a very long process for you. So keep your eyes on our website for calendars and just plan accordingly.
Thank you. And Susan, and you have some government money, right?
Yes.
Which maybe we should talk about too. Yeah.
So for ArtsWestchester's programs, from go live to decision making, it's usually a 4 to 6 month process, give or take, where we will open an application online. We'll do e-blasts, we'll do info sessions. We encourage folks to set up time to speak to one of us, bless you, one-on-one, although it's not required. As a grants department, we are a staff of 2.5, including me. I have one other full-time person and one half-time person. So we are very busy. At different times of year, we tend to have a kind of a fall deadline cycle and a spring deadline cycle, although things have also shifted with us with some of the funding that has come in. We do receive funding, bless you, from the New York State Council on the Arts, as well as Westchester County Legislature. And some of those funding bodies then help shape some of the parameters of what we can and cannot fund. But we encourage folks to set up a time to talk to us ahead of time. Once the application has come in, sometimes we build in a feedback window. We're very nice, where we might get back to you if there's anything that jumps out at us as a concern, a red flag, if something comes in that we know that we just can't fund for one reason or the other. We might get back to the applicant and say, hey, we have some questions. And then from there, it goes on to, I referenced earlier, we do a panel for all of our competitive grant applications. And depending on the funding source, sometimes the panelists are local to Westchester or Rockland, or sometimes they're regional because we want that kind of arm's length distance. But it's all arts and culture professionals who have proficiency or expertise in a certain arts or culture area, are skilled at reading a budget. And it's the panel, which I sometimes describe to my applicants as a room full of strangers. The panel reads everything. The panel looks at the scoring rubric, and then they weigh in on artistic integrity, financial stability, benefit and engagement to the community, those types of things. The panel meets to discuss everything. It then goes from the panel to our grants committee and then to our board. So there's layers to the conversation. And ultimately the board is charged with making the final decisions based on the funding that's available and how that panel has responded to that application.
All right. Thank you all. I'm going to ask a question now, and concisely, can you share with us as best you can, what are some of the strong things you see in our proposals, and where do we fall flat? Where are the weak points? What could we do better? Whoever wants to chime in. Tara.
Sometimes we rejoice because we get a proposal in that basically writes its own summary. It is so crisp. The details are so well laid out. It answered the questions we asked, and we don't have to go back. I had one recently. I didn't have to go back to them for anything. They put it all there and very concisely. So those are the ones we celebrate. Where people fall short, too much language, jargon language, hype or razzle dazzle, claims that cannot be substantiated by any data, describing the global issue around your particular problem, but not drilling down to the Westchester specifics. I mean, those are just some of them. And then the inability to create a budget that makes sense. And we create a part of that challenge because we don't do general operating support. We do ask you for a program project budget. We know it's confusing sometimes, but if the budget doesn't make sense and we have to go back and forth with you 6 or 8 times to get the math right, it's really challenging for us.
Thank you. Susan.
I will echo all of that. Proposals, I would say, that feel aspirational, but haven't given us the mechanics of how this is going to happen. We see it, we're in the arts, so we see a lot of things that are kind of ephemeral, but they're missing the nuts and bolts of the where and the when and the how. Echoing also the budget statement, folks who don't take advantage of budget notes, budget comments, adding any kind of detail to your budget. If your budget feels aspirational, that might be a cause for concern. And also the question of capacity. It's fine if you're venturing into a project or a forum or something that you haven't tackled before, but then you need to give us, that room full of strangers, the confidence that you have done your research, you can execute this. Otherwise, if someone reads this and they feel that this is too aspirational, I don't feel that this person can really make this happen. That might be the difference between funding and not funding.
Great. I don't know that I can add a lot, I ditto to a lot of that, but I think clarity is very, very important. And for us, we have two processes. We have the LOI process where we have, like I said, about 2,000 applications. So I would really recommend in your first few sentences, you are very clearly saying what the program is and why in the first few sentences, because, you know, I've had a program officer colleague who was an organization that I knew that I was really great. And she was like, I didn't understand what's going on. And we have so many grants to go through. If you don't understand it, it's just not going to sort of get into the heads of the PO. So I think is the most important thing is being able to be persuasive in a very clear and simple way. I think getting acronyms, if we aren't familiar with the acronyms and we have to look it up, I think that's one thing. And having to go sort of for us, because we have the LOI and the application, if you have did both, to referring back versus sort of going back and forth between screens. So the essence is make it easy for the reader is basically what it is, I think is the biggest suggestion I would give.
I would agree with everything. Basically write like you were writing a news article, the who, what, where, when, why in the first paragraph. And I'd be happy with just that. Less is more. And additionally, I tell this to all fundraisers, EDs, et cetera. Don't chase the money. We can tell. Be true to your core competence and what you're doing and how you're doing it. The passion will come through. And it makes our jobs easier. And, you know, call me and ask me, do you know anybody else who we would fit? I will help you find them. But yeah, stay true to who you are and what the organization really wants to accomplish. And don't try to
Thank you. That's
recreate
great.
the,
I'm
yeah.
hearing some people that are willing to talk to you for clarity beforehand. And just picking up on some things, LOIs. Do you read the LOI when you read the full proposal? Do you refer back, or is that one and done and then you move on?
I had a very painful experience with an organization who submitted an LOI for one thing and a proposal that was very different, and having to negotiate that and say, I'm sorry, we can fund this, what we invited you for, and what is in your proposal is not what you were invited for. It was awkward and painful. It was an organization I had a lot of respect for. I still do. It's just that was very awkward. So yes, they need to fit, because the LOI for us is our assurance that you fit our fund purposes and our program priorities. I can't present upstream something that does not fit fund priorities and program priorities. I will get shot down, right?
Okay.
So yes.
Yes. All right.
So yeah, we do reference it. It's not sort of end all be all. And for us, the LOI process is sort of, you send something in, it's blind, you look at it. If you go to the application process, we actually have conversations with you. And so that's where we'll see, this is what you suggested, this is what you thought, but now you're doing something else. Talk to us about why or why not, and we'll see if it fits. And once again, we are fairly broad, but we do have our, 5 basic areas that we look in, program areas. So to say that, yes, you're starting fresh, sort of, we're looking at an application, but we are referring back to make sure you're at least sort of on the same path that you were before.
All right. Anybody else want to chime in? All right. And then I also heard talk about budgets and finance. So let's go there. I know you don't like money talk. You like to get it, but not to do the back stuff. So how closely do you look at our finances? Some of us write the grants, but do you look at our 990? Do you look at our audit? Do you look at our finances?
Yes.
Talk about the whole picture. It's not just the words we write. Yes. Talk about that a little, please.
We're a very small organization, and if we feel that our $15,000 grant isn't going to make an impact, we're not going to fund. So we go through how you're going to spend it, where it's going to go, and to make sure it's going to make that impact, and that you can explain how it will.
But do you look at the 990
Yes.
audit? Are you looking at the
Yes.
financial health of the organization?
Yeah, many of ours don't do an audit. They do
the
just the
few do.
990. So yes,
Yeah.
we go through it.
And do you need things explained if there's some red flags?
Yes.
Just anything.
I'll ask questions big
Okay.
time. And I have board members who will come back to me and say, the notes on page 32 don't jibe with what the budget says.
Matters. Okay, anybody else want to chime in on that?
We have a whole team. We have a separate team that looks at our financials. And so we will sort of do a cursory look, but then we have a team that comes in, we work with them, we're sort of integrated. But we definitely do look at the 990s, we look at the financial reports. We do in that question Q&A part that we're having with you at the application period. We do ask questions if something comes up, if there is a red flag. But I do have to say that I think it's, unless you're sort of in bankruptcy at the moment, and it's very dire, I don't know that we've actually turned somebody away. That's sort of the biggest thing, but we will highlight it and sort of ask for an explanation about if something that comes up as a red flag.
We will ask for an audit or a 990 if you're applying for organizational support, but for most of our funding is project-based funding. So we won't ask for an audit or 990, but we might ask for just a general organizational budget. And in general, we try to fund as much as possible that comes in. And I think one mistake that I've seen is folks that try to shy away from some of the realities. If you're running a deficit, that's not a deal breaker. If you can explain your deficit, a plan like how it came about, and a plan to resolve that deficit, then we're fine. So the bottom line for a lot of these things is, so long as it's explained or explainable, we can probably roll with a lot of things. We've certainly seen some organizations that for one reason or another might get themselves into a bit of a pickle. And then that's just an organization that maybe we're just going to spend a little bit more time with. Maybe there's some other benchmarks, or we're going to bring them in every 3 to 6 months just to check in. Hey, how's it going? How's that deficit pay down working for you? So long as we can have an open dialogue and communication and they can be transparent, usually we can work with most folks.
Exactly. Yeah.
And for us, there is, like at Mother Cabrini, a team that looks deeply at your 990 and audit, especially if you're brand new to us, and sort of approves you for funding. And then at the program officer level, we do look at your 990s and we do look at your organizational budget, and we try to at least see, are there some red flags that we should follow up on? What about those 3 deficits in a row? And the project budget and your whether what you say you will use to fund what we aren't funding, because we generally don't fund 100%. Is that reality based, or is it really aspirational and maybe unrealistic? So those are the kind of things we're looking for.
Do you see sometimes the budget doesn't jive with the narrative
Yes.
too often?
I think as somebody who has written grants, sometimes, and so I'm very tolerant, because I know that sometimes this person in your organization is writing the budget, this person in your organization is writing the project, is writing the program piece, this person is writing the organizational piece. So one of the big things we talked about, sort of what we look for, is consistency. So you really do need to have somebody read through the whole thing and make sure the through line is all the way through. The budget matches because maybe the budget was done earlier and then you guys changed the program that you wrote about. And so now it doesn't match, but it's like, it's due right now, so submit it, right? So I think that that's the piece that you really have to sort of take the time to have somebody, one person, just read through the whole thing and make sure it makes sense. So I'm not saying, I don't think it's like on purpose that we're trying to hide things. I think it's programs change, budgets change.
Yeah.
So, so the narratives do have to match the program and the impacts and the measurements and the metrics and all of the things. But I understand, having done this, why sometimes they don't.
All right, good. We good with budgets, money? Okay, thank you.
Can I just add
Yes.
one thing? I have noticed that if the person writing it is an employee and living it, they tend to understand the narrative and the budget better than a consultant. And it's just because the consultant isn't in there living the day-to-day. So if you are a consultant, make sure you get up to speed on what the budget looks like and how it evolves over time, because they do. And we understand that. Nobody's budget is going to be lock, step, and barrel all year long.
You guys are very understanding. I'm not hearing anybody been thrown out, right? So just shifting gears for just a moment. I know big in our world is talk about AI. Are you seeing AI? Oh, Okay, I don't know what the laughing is, but just, I don't want to dwell on it, but how are you thinking about AI? Are you seeing applications where you can tell it's been used? Are you using it in sorting grants? Are you considering using it in reviewing grants? Just quick talk about AI, then we'll move on. I don't know if that was, I want to talk about it or I don't.
I think it was the basic.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right, we won't dwell on it, but
No.
anybody want to say anything?
No,
Okay.
don't use AI, please.
So I have to say that because I'm a fill and I was sort of talking to people last night to sort of get an idea, and our managing director said that, and I had no idea, that apparently the platform that we use, they're looking into the capacities, the AI capacities. I don't know what that's actually going to mean, but in the future, but as of now, we have not sort of thinking about it, looking at it, obviously shouldn't use it, but I don't know if other people at the platforms that people use to submit applications, I don't know if at some point in the future, that is something that will have the capacity to determine something, right? So I don't know.
Okay, all right. Anybody else want to? No.
I had a question though for myself, as I was thinking back on some of the really too many word proposals that I've crossed my desk recently. Is there an AI program that would take that proposal for the writer and edit it, right? Because there are too many adverbs, there's too less, too few details. I don't know, but to our knowledge, we haven't seen anything that's come in that's AI generated. I hope we would know if we saw it, but since we're going to be in conversation with you anyway, and please make sure if it is AI generated, that you know what in the world you submitted.
That's a good one.
Same. I don't
Okay.
think we've had it. I hope I'd be able to tell. But yeah, we have a lot, we're high touch when it comes to our grantees. So I think at some point it would come out.
And I'll just, as an aside, we've certainly had a lot of conversations about AI and fundraising writing and grant writing, and it's a time saver and the guardrails and cautions you need to be aware of. And GPLH is doing a webinar December 7th, webinar, not in person. And we're going to be talking about that and some of the ethical concerns and issues and how to use it responsibly. So look for that if you'd like. All right, enough about that. All right, let's move to another Val, equity. How important is DEI to you in terms of ensuring applicants focus on progress, on equity? How do you encourage movement towards equity? What are you doing to facilitate greater equity? Just anything we can talk about that. Do our proposals reflect what you want to see us moving towards and doing? Any red flags, anything to say is strong regarding how we're presenting DEI, equity, how we're working in our organizations? A big question.
So for Mother Cabrini, we are new. And so I think inherent in the Mother Cabrini mission is this idea of health equity and looking at the social determinants of health. And that's what's driving what we're doing. So inherent in what we're doing, I think that comes out, but I think is not a good enough answer. And so I think that, we are going to look at this that's one of the things we're looking at. When we started, we're just giving out money. And now I think we're going to be intentional about what our formal process and proposal will be. Those of you who applied know that we do ask a question about sort of the communities you work with. And so for us, it's evolving. Our whole, everything is evolving. We are looking at the drivers of health and thinking about what the communities, what you submit to us is actually very helpful in helping us think about what the community is looking at. I will say that you've asked about red flags, and maybe this will come up later, but working with the community is incredibly important to us. Knowing that you recognize the humanity of the communities you work with, it's incredibly important. And I think everybody in this room does that. I have had an application where I was like, do you even like the people you're working with? And so I just want to make sure that, if stereotypes are coming out, things are coming out. I am an immigrant, I sort of woman of color, I sort of look at these things. And so I think that those are red flags. Like if it's a community, if it's an organization that doesn't seem to understand their community, for me personally, I think for a lot of us, that is something that will come out. But as far as a formal equity or DEI statement, I think that is something that we are working on and working towards.
I don't think anybody in this room would do this, but I did recently read a proposal where the reference to, and with this in the field of environmental justice, the reference to communities that would be served by this proposal, was a different project, there had been no LOIs, was to me so offensive. and it indicated that the organization did not in fact know anybody in those communities and had not been present. So, as you said, we value the authenticity of the work organizations do in communities and that they know the people and cultures that they are serving. So it has to be authentic, no window dressing, please. And our board has led the way on our own internal work on DEI. And you may know about the Westchester Index, which was our attempt to begin to disaggregate data across all areas of county life, because if we're not looking at the data, we may be missing where equity is missing, right? We may not be seeing it. So we're working on that. And I'll just speak for what I see from my grantees is I just see this authentic work in the community, this authentic work to develop leaders from the communities that are being served, and a real increase in the number of leaders of color who have responsibility within organizations. And that's, one of our small ways of supporting DEI in the nonprofit sector has been to target our capacity building dollars to invite emerging leaders of color or executive directors of color into learning cohorts to work on things they want to work on that will strengthen their own leadership and their organization. So we're aware of it, but it's not like if you're not doing equity work, we won't look at you, but we're going to look at the authenticity of it.
I would echo that, and also the authenticity, the intentionality, and we look at both the program itself, how it was chosen, but also the organization. So almost regardless of the type of funding, we're going to ask about staff and board demographics. We're going to ask about recruiting efforts. If we're looking at a particular program, how is that program chosen? Who is the audience that you're hoping to reach with this program? I imagine around the room, we could probably all tell some really uncomfortable stories. And from my own personal experience, an organization who, their DEI strategy might be, we're going to do Smokey Joe's Cafe and we're done. Like that's not going to land the plane. And that we want to see something that goes much more deeper than a program that's going to reach an audience, full stop. So how is the decision-making made? Who's involved in the decision-making? What does your leadership and board look like? Is there representation in your organization of the communities that you're trying to reach? If not, why not? And are you trying to make steps towards rectifying that? Because if there's audiences that you're hoping to engage, you need to have those voices as part of the decision-making to actually be successful and authentic in making it happen.
Helpful, I hope. All right, changing topics now. So we didn't get the grant. We want to learn, we want to address your concerns, we want to get the grant the next time, we want to know why we didn't get it. Do you provide feedback? How can we learn? Let's just go around that a little bit. Do you provide feedback? How can we learn? How can we do better? Anybody want to start?
Sure. Yes, I definitely will have a conversation with, if we do not give the grant. Again, I'm the only staff person, so give me a week at least in between and then reach out, and I'm happy to set up time and have a conversation. A lot of time it's just, again, we're a small organization. We didn't have the funds at the time. We allow you to apply again next year. And especially if you're a new organization to us, let's spend that next couple of months and get to know each other better. Invite me to something, I'll come to it and get to understand better.
Very helpful.
When not necessarily the gala. I don't want to go to a gala. I want to go to a program.
We are a large organization, but we get a lot of grants. So at the LOI stage, we really are unable to give feedback. We do the frequently asked questions. We put that up. We are always so as a program officer, I can say that it's just a matter of numbers. We get so many really, really good grants. But we are also a statewide organization. And so there's this balancing that we do. I do not even know the formula. It's sort of upstate and downstate and Rochester and Buffalo and the immigrants community and the women's community. And then we have the, sort of all these different formulas that we're looking at. And so I think we could have, for example, it might be really competitive for an immigrant program in New York City. There might be 20 of them that are really, really good. And then we only have 2 in Rochester, right? And so it's this balancing act that has to happen. So I will say that there's a little bit of that happens with us. And so you're being not asked to go on. It's not anything reflecting generally the program itself. So it's just very competitive. But to balance that is that, like some of these other groups, we are doing generally open open sort of a process. So everybody can apply. So feel free to apply. We are going to review your application. And if you know the program officer, so there are ways. If you happen to have a contact with the program officer, they can probably give you general feedback. I don't know if they can give you specific feedback.
For us, declines happen mostly at the letter of intent stage. Once we invite a proposal, it's really rare that it gets declined. And at the letter of intent stage, often it is a budget question. Some of our categories, for example, basic human needs, very competitive. Why so competitive? Our funding in that area is so small because, as I said, we work out of dedicated streams of funds, and we don't have as robust a budget in basic needs and human services than we do in youth development, for example. But even in our more robustly funded program areas like youth development, there's always more demand for dollars than there is there's always more demand than there are dollars. So often you will get, if you apply and it's a decline, it will be, we had to make hard decisions and we're unable to invite you forward. If it's more of and often the calls that I get for young and new organizations, and sometimes those declines are because you're just brand new. You have a board of 3. You've never raised a penny. And it's very hard for a young, new, small organization to get a foundation grant. And so those conversations then are, here are the things that will make you more competitive, but it's going to take time for you to get there. So we can't respond to everybody, but often we will respond to an email or a call if there's something more than budget that we have to say about why you weren't invited to a proposal.
We encourage folks, all of our applicants, to set up a time to talk to us, regardless if they were funded or not. Most often it's the folks that weren't funded that actually take advantage of that, but we try to block off a 20 or 30-minute appointment to go over with them how that panel responded to that proposal. And I always try to emphasize that it's how that panel responded to that proposal. If you took the exact same proposal and came back with it next year, a different panel is going to respond differently. And yes, unfortunately, a lot of times it is just a case of we didn't have enough money to go around, which is always a really rough conversation to have with someone where you had a perfectly respectable proposal and just from points or from a funding standpoint, another proposal or a few other proposals edged you out. But we do encourage folks to set up that time to talk with us. And since our grant cycles are fairly predictable, we do encourage folks to come back again. And every year is a fresh, clean slate. So being declined one year has absolutely no impact on a future year. Same as being funded one year has absolutely no bearing on whether or not you'll be funded again, which can also get dicey if someone is funded one year and then not the next. And that's the conversation. Well, I put in the exact same proposal. I was like, well, that panel responded differently and they had questions that last year's panel didn't. So it also points to every year you have to treat it like a new year and zhuzh up your narrative again and make sure that room full of strangers is looking at it with fresh eyes.
That's a good point. I have 2 more questions and I'm going to open it up to the floor. So have your questions ready. Zhuzh up a proposal. Sometimes we have the same program we need funding for, right? This is our great program. We want to fund it. What happens if we submit largely the same proposal because it's the same program? Is that frowned on? Do we always need to mix it up? Just any quick thoughts about that?
But Allison, surely in the year between the 2 proposals, the organization has learned some new things, has some new outcomes to report on, has new observations about the community. I mean, we trust that you are a learning and growing organization and that your program is maturing as you roll forward. And yes, it may still be the same after-school program, but surely year to year, there are nuances to what you've learned and what you're trying that you're not putting in front of us to razzle dazzle us, because like I said, we do not want to be sold, right? We just want the real facts about what you're doing, but surely you're learning and growing as you develop your programs. That's what I would say.
And I want to add to that, if the program didn't work, that's okay. Come back to us and say, we tried X. We think if we had done X and Y, that would have made it work, or the time wasn't the right, or we couldn't find the kids, or whatever it was, come back to us. And yes, we will fund that again because you actually need it more. We have funded many programs where the first iteration didn't work. And they came to us and say, can you come and spend a year or two with us and say, give us the time to make it work. And yeah.
I'm willing to do that. That's great.
And just say, we will fund the same program over and over again, not over and over again, but we'll fund it, right? But I do say, just on a practical level, I've gotten some that say, same as last year. Like the narrative is like, same applicant. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not the same person, I'm not the same PO. Like I have to go back. And so just on a practical level, please just write it. And if it's intentional that you're rewriting the same thing, say, this is the same as last year, blah, 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 blah. And we learned this, or we learned that, or whatever. But to have, I've actually had things that say, this is just like last year's application. Like that sentence doesn't help me. So just on a practical level, that's just, you just let it go.
Well, and just to follow up
You
on that,
laugh, but that has happened.
just on a
You wouldn't do that.
right? Just think about us. I mean, we are reading over several different topics all year long and working with multiple organizations. So you don't really expect me to go back to last year's proposal, I hope, or to remember it off the top of my head, right? Is what you write, be a friend to your reader, right? Help your reader format it, bullet points, titles of paragraphs, or this is the question I'm answering. And don't assume we know anything about your program, even if we have been there within the last 3 months, right? Because we're dealing with a lot of information and we want your information fresh and crisp right in front of us. So we
And
can
my
work with
board
it.
members are 93 years old, 88 years old, 81 years old, 72, 70. So people's memories aren't as good as they used to be.
Wow, that's interesting. All right, my last question, then I'm going to open it up. Pet peeves, what should we never do? Red flags, just quickly. Anybody?
I think I'm sort of a curmudgeon and maybe a product.
You are
of my
not.
No, a product of my generation. Well, in other words, one of my little pet peeves is the use of the word partner, meaning we want to partner with the foundation to do X, Y, Z. And I want to say, we want to have good working relationships with our grantees and we want to know you, but generally we make a grant so you can do your work. And so we're your grant, we're your funder, we're not your partner. It's just a little lingo thing, but it assumes a whole lot to say that the foundation is partnering with you. That's my pet peeve.
I'm fairly tolerant because I've written these. I just know, you don't know who's gonna read them. So I'm pretty tolerant. I have to say that one thing I did mention, sort of communities, knowing your communities, that's a red flag for me. I will say, just as advice, just when I ran a hunger organization in Maryland, I had all these great funders and I was in touch with them and we would check in every once in a while. And then I got a new funder and I was just so busy. We were a small organization. I did not keep in touch. And then when it came time to renew, I did not get that renewal. And I was like, oh, and I knew what it was because I did not keep in touch. So I'm not saying you need to like be best friends with your PO. You don't need to email them every week, but I think just to maybe get on their newsletter, send a newsletter, I mean, get on their, have them on your mailing list, something that just keeps in touch a little bit is actually a good thing. Not harass, not send a zillion emails, not send a cake, which I got it when I was working at Atlantic. But this some kind of communications. I did that and I to this day, obviously, I'm still thinking about it. Like, I cannot believe I did not keep in touch with that funder and I was not renewed. So.
I would say keeping me in the dark over a major transition, whether it's this is my biggest one. Let me know if your executive director is leaving, has left, and what the plan is. And it can be in the middle of a cycle or right when you're applying again. That doesn't give me faith to move forward if you are hiding something that major.
All right, thank you.
Changing the board members is a little different, but if you're now adding 5 when you only had 3, that's big, that kind of major shift.
I will say, and when I do info sessions, I have kind of like my words of wisdom. I would say pet peeves include folks who clearly didn't read the guidelines and apply for something that I 1000% cannot fund at all. Ditto folks who keep information away from you, like they changed a program that we funded and then didn't tell us until after the fact. That's kind of annoying. And I'm all for confidence, but I've seen very kind of effusive language about using the word best or using the word only. You really have to be careful with that unless you are so certain that you can make that statement. We are the only something in Westchester County. And if that's an easily fact checked for Google and you're wrong, then that's a problem. It may not keep you from being funded, but it's definitely going to make me pay a little bit closer to your application and wonder how seriously you took this.
All right, thank you, thank you, thank you. We keep going. It's your turn. And I'm going to have you say it loudly, then I'm going to repeat it for the folks, for everybody. So yes.
I have a question going back to something Kara said about wanting the money to be impactful to the organization. And so do you look at the overall organizational budget and say, will this be impactful? And if so, are those thresholds published anywhere? Is that something that each organization says we only fund organizations with this amount of organizational budget over or under a certain amount?
All right, so I'm going to repeat it for the folks on Zoom. The question was about their money being impactful, and I guess the scale, the proportion, is there a scale to determine what is impactful in terms of your award to their size organization?
We're very small. And so again, we want our $15,000 to make a difference. Many times we'll fund an organization that has one program. So it is general operating. And in that case, the 15,000 means a lot. It used to be we were in the $1 million range, but with inflation and paying employees a living wage now, we're very happy about that. We've moved that number up substantially. It's probably under 2.5 million. It's not published, but again, that's where the conversation comes out beforehand. And then we will fund a pilot program that isn't in the regular budget of, a $20 million organization. So it's kind of a, yes.
All right, I'm going to keep it flowing because there's a lot of hands. Wendy over there, and then I'll come back over here. So Wendy and then you. So the question is, when the organization's fiscal year doesn't align with was it the funders' year? How do we reconcile that?
This is going to sound so pedestrian, but the first time I ever had to write a grant, and this is when I knew nothing, right? And I was writing the grant to Fannie Mae Foundation for a homeless organization, and there was no matchup. I took our budget. I put sheets on the, flips chart sheets, 12 months. This is when our fiscal year is. This is when the grant year starts. That's how I did it. It's the only way I knew how to do it. You just have to do the math, is what I tell people.
I don't know if that's helpful.
It can be a challenge. So with ArtsWestchester, most of our grants are July, June, and some of our grants are January, December. What, to the extent possible, we try to ask that the organization match the numbers to that contract period. Now, that being said, I know that organizations have fiscal years all over the place. I've seen March, February, I've seen September, August. So it might be square peg, round hole, but what we aim for, what we aspire for is matching with what the contract window is.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Hi, good morning. First of all, thank you so much. I think everything you've said is useful. I'm scribbling them furiously. I wonder, another budget question. For those of you who give one-off funding that is being built into an existing organizational budget or programmatic budget, and the award that you give, while extremely helpful, is not covering the full cost of the program. The budget that we submit to you is often a function of gaps in other sources of funding. And so with that in mind, I wonder if you could say a little bit more about what you, earlier you said, you know, we see a budget that doesn't make sense, that's a challenge. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about what to you does not make sense with the budget, particularly knowing that we're often coming up with a budget based on gaps in other funding, and that it might be, you know, a portion of what we need, but not all of it.
So the question has to do with a project that has a bigger grant, a bigger amount, and we're asking for a portion of it, and there might be some holes, and how you perceive that when we have holes because we haven't filled them with other grants or funding.
I mean, in our process, we give you a budget a budget table that asks you where else are you seeking funding, and when did you already hear, or when might you hear, and then if it seems to be a sort of grounded in reality kind of narrative, I mean, that makes sense. We know that you don't have every penny when you write this grant, and we also know that not every penny will come through of what you've got out there in the world, but at least you've presented a plan. You plan to raise money. When I say, but sometimes budgets don't make sense, you know, that the math just doesn't work. That you've got expenses over projected revenue, or, you know, that kind of thing. But, you know, surely the organization can say these gaps we will fill with individual fundraising, gala proceeds. And we have these grants out, and we expect to hear when. And so we know you won't have every penny. And then we just explain to our reviewers and our board of advisors, we'll continue to fundraise when we have confidence that you actually will continue to fundraise. But you're running the organization and you want to keep the doors open. So we believe that you will continue to fundraise.
And also, I will say, building on that, fundraise at a level that is, I guess, what's what I'm looking for, to be expected for your organization. So if you put in a budget line, you know, $10,000 for individual giving with no note attached to it, and I have your organizational budget, and last year individual giving was $3,000, that's a question. If you're a performance-based project and you budget $10,000 for ticket sales, but we know the size of your venue, and in order to get 10,000 in ticket sales, you need to sell out every single performance for the rest of the year. I think a lot of this ties to these ideas of leaving the reader to connect the dots for you. And yes, echoing what was just said, that we understand that this is a budget is a plan. You don't know what's going to happen, but so long as we know what your plan is, ticket sales, board giving, what have you. I've written these foundation grants. I'm going to write these other foundation grants. So, oh, okay, I know what the plan is. And also with our applications, we frequently ask, how will your project change in the event that you were not funded at the level you've requested? Which that's us being transparent. We're probably not going to be able to fund you at the level you requested. And we want you thinking about that. I've asked for $5,000. If I get $1,000, what does that mean? And actually, candidly, I've had folks say, no, thank you. This is a lot of work for $1,000. And then a grant comes back because it's just not feasible for what we can fund them at.
Yes.
Shifting gears a little bit, we dive deeply into the grant application process. Yay, we got the award. Can you tell me a little do's and don'ts from your perspective about the reporting piece? What do you look for? What are you not looking for? And that it doesn't meet your criteria of what you're looking for, does that cancel you out for a whole potential next grant?
All right, so the question is, they got the grant, yay! Now they're reporting, and concerns about reporting, and did they meet the parameters? If they don't report properly, what does that bode for the future?
I recently streamlined that process and incorporated it into the renewal. So the first paragraph of that is, tell me what you did with the grant last time and the budget, and what you deemed its impact was. Did you hit the goals you wanted to? Or if you didn't, this is what we learned, and this is how we're going to change it. And hence, here's my next grant and request. And this is why we're going to ask you again.
So we are actually fairly generous with no cost extensions and budget modifications. Our plan is to work with you as a partner. Sorry, is to really have the conversations. And so if something's not going well, because 6 months ago, because we have a long process, or 8 months ago, you developed this budget and it's not exactly line for line, exactly what you said. We have a threshold, and we will make budget modifications. We will do no cost extensions. It will not ding you, so to speak. We just more is the clarity and the transparency between within the relationship. I think that's the most important thing. Let us know this really didn't work. We're going to try this, or this is great, but we had to shuffle things around, and we will work with you.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is please don't miss your reporting deadlines, please. And I would say, please don't wait until the final report to indicate there was a problem and that you haven't spent all the money. Please ask us midpoint, for a conversation to help us understand what shifted, what changed, and what your plans are for continuing to implement the project. So that's the first thing. I mean, and it's that communication and letting us problem solve with you. We do modify budgets, but we modify them in conversation with you. Our paperwork is pretty rigid. It says, budget modifications must be approved in advance by your program officer. So please pay attention to the paperwork and then let us know there's an issue. And then once you do report, I don't know what other folks' questions are on the reporting form. Please just answer the questions. Who got served? What difference did it make? How did you count what difference it made? Right? It's those real questions, so we understand the value of the work that you did.
All right, I'm gonna move on. Last question, last one, and then we can talk afterwards, but last one.
Several of you mentioned having an open call every year. I'm wondering, kind of like from the fundraising standpoint, is often like easier to get a renewal versus like new money. And so I'm wondering how you allocate renewal funding versus like funding available to you.
Question is, how much money is available generally for renewals versus new requests?
The same, whatever.
For us, it depends. And we have done some cycles where if we know that we have the exact same money as last year, we won't do an open call, because then we run the risk of stretching the same money further. And we try not to go backwards if we can. For the most part though, if it is an open call, it's fair game. And the fact that you were funded 1 year is not a guarantee of continued funding. And we don't do percentages, so much for renewals and so much for news. We try to look at everything level and have the proposal, rise and fall on its merits. But if we're doing an open call, then that is invitation to everyone, and everyone's starting at the same starting line.
Yeah. We have no formula, right? And we are always eager to learn about organizations we haven't worked with before and learn about their programs. So for us, then it's the letter of intent. as a form. And what we say to our organizations that have been funded, remember, we don't fund forever and ever, amen, right? Because we do hope to be able to fund additional organizations over time.
There is no guarantee of funding next year, but we do want to ensure that projects or pilots that we've started have a little bit of a life, but we don't sort of have it hard and fast, but there is no guarantee.
And let's end it there. There are no guarantees in life, but hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this was helpful and you'll end up with more funding. So let's thank you all so very much. It's recorded. You can see it afterwards. We're so grateful and we'll stick around a few minutes. Thank you all for coming. Thank you. Thank you.